Good evening and welcome to Chayah Chayil, and I am your host, Chayah Janet E. Brown. And tonight we are continuing on the fall scripture study, and the series is Influential Women of the Torah, and we're going to talk about Yochebed. This is the mother of Moses, or what we know as Moshe, and we're going to talk about influence through surrender. We're also going to talk about how and understand who she was and what her name meant. So I will tell you that her name, Yoheved, meant Yahweh or Yahuwah is glory. And she was a daughter of Levi and the mother of Aaron, Miriam, and Moses. And she was the wife of Amram as well as his aunt. And we're going to be coming from scripture in Exodus 2nd chapter 1 to 10. I will be referring from the Aramaic and the Tanakh or in the Torah while I talk about this particular episode. We do know that at this time that Miriam was a 6-year-old girl, and we have come to know that she was a prophet. And she gave such a word to her parents. And her father is a spiritual leader. And they're from the tribe of Levi. We're going to also look at about her role in all of this. And also on the Pharaoh's daughter, Bithia, and her important part in all of this. And so we're come to find out that he is not an ordinary child. And in Hebrew, for fine, F-I-N-E, is Tov, T-O-V, which means good. And we're going to find out some very, very key points in here. And about Princess Bithia, as she is also known. One thing I want you to keep a listen out for when I talk about the wet nurse and the difference between the Egyptian women that wet nurse and also on the Hebrew wet nurse, and why it was important and how did this play a very, very important role in Moses' life, and what was key to this, and how Yahuwah was the one who orchestrated all of this about him and about this. But what's more important is that, how the process in trying to hide him, and then coming to a time in her life, Moses' mother, where she had to surrender and let him go. So I take it you have everything? You ready? Let's begin. Good evening. I am your host, Chayah Janet E. Brown, and this is Chayah Chayil podcast. This is part of the Chayah Ministries Global Women's Ministry, and we're doing the series on influential women of the Torah. I was having some technical difficulties, could not understand why, but I had recorded this, and 45 minutes of it, and it was just gone. It was there, and when I went to convert it, it was there, and when I went to open it back up, it was not there. So at times, this is the warfare that I go through when producing podcasts, when I go to speak, and any teachings or anything else that needs to be done. So I am being physically attacked in my body, but I will not let this stop me from getting this done. And in addition to that, I've had 2 sets of family members, funerals. The 3 persons have passed, and one of my Tamida's mother has transitioned home. And so it's been a situation, because I know these people, know them well. They are all like family to me. And so their hurts and pains, I have a tendency of pulling it on myself. And I've had to learn that once I intercede and so forth, how to take it off and give it to the Father to take hold of it And I have a cousin that had been going in and out of surgery, and he's had to go back in for surgery. So I'm going to have to contact him again to see how he's doing. But in the midst of all of this, we always know that Abba is in control, and that Abba is grace and his mercy. And we have to learn how to give things to him. And so that is what I have done, and wipe the tears from my eyes and everything else, and getting this off, because I don't want to be a target for depression to try to come in, because depression does come in during times when you're mourning, and if you're not careful, that spirit will snatch you. So to constantly remember the scriptures that states that those who mourn, they shall be comforted. That has been my prayer for myself, as well as for those in the family that is going through this particular season of loss of family members. So I'm going to just go in like I usually do. And tonight we're going to talk about Yochebed, influence through surrender is the title of this part of the series of influential women of the Torah. And so let us begin. I take every spirit in the hearing of my voice under my control, that no other spirit except that of the Ruach HaKodesh will be allowed to speak or manifest during this time of ministry. The angels that thou hast given unto me, my troops, during this warfare, shall cover me and be deployed by me to battle or warfare as directed, as it is your will. They are fully armored in all areas, and so am I, as you have made it so. Those that have an ear to hear what thus say, Yahweh, receive full portions, the messages from heaven's throne room. A hedge of protection shall be upon us during this session and upon the conclusion of this session of ministry, that no repercussions, demonic, demon attacks, thoughts, words of non-life, chants, spells shall not have no effect upon me, his vassal, and unto those who hear this message, and that no weapons which have been formed against us, they shall not prosper, and no enemy, mentally, physically, or spiritually, shall get to us during this session, that we shall be fully restored in faith, health, thought, and ready to receive the next bounty unto which shall be distributed upon your people and those seeking you. For we are girded with your faith, belief, your strength, your favor, grace, mercy, love, and your covering. And so the words that go forth out of my mouth, they shall not return unto me void, but shall accomplish that which pleases Abba, and shall prosper in the things whereto they are sent. Abba, glorify thy name. What is, or who is Yocheved? She is the daughter of Levi. She was the wife of Amram and the mother of Moshe. Her name means Yahweh is glory. According to the Torah, Yochebed, excuse me for just a moment, I want to get this distraction off. Okay. Yocheved was a daughter, like I said, of Levi and the mother of Aaron, Miriam and Moses, Moshe. She was the wife of Amram as well as his aunt. Now, this was allowed, this type of marriage. This was before the Torah was delivered to the people. So that's why it was this type of marriage. But afterwards, if we remember, these things change. In Exodus, we're coming from Exodus in 2nd chapter 1 to 10. So I'm going to read that to you, and we'll get into more detail about this woman whose name means Yahweh is glory. A man went from the house of Levi and took a daughter of Levi,
The woman conceived and gave birth to a son. She saw that he was good, and she hid him for 3 months. She could not hide him any longer, so she took for him a basket and smeared it with clay and pitch. She placed the boy into it and placed it among the reeds at the bank of the river. His sister stationed herself at a distance to know what would be done with him. Pharaoh's daughter, Bithiah. Now, some people say that they do not know what her name is, but we have come to know her name as Bithiah, went down to bathe by the river, and her maidens walked along the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent her maidservants, and she took it. She opened it and saw him, the boy, and behold, a youth was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew boys." His sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and summon for you a wet nurse from the Hebrew women, who will nurse the boy for you?" The daughter of Pharaoh said, "Go." The girl went and summoned the boy's mother, which was also her mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this boy and nurse him for me, and I will give you your pay." So the woman took the boy and nursed him. The boy grew up, and she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was a son to her. She called his name Moshe, as she said, "For I drew him from the water." That is the end of the scripture reading. This concise passage is a model plan in the hidden workings of Yahweh's providence, and how man's most intelligent analysis falls short of comprehending, and surely of thwarting or changing the divine will. Amram and Jochebed, the parents of Miriam and Aaron, separated rather than bring into the world boys who would be murdered under Pharaoh's decree. 6-year-old Miriam, now catch this, 6-year-old Miriam argued that they were worse than Pharaoh, for their decree prevented the birth of even girls. Also, she said, Pharaoh is a mortal king whose decrees may or may not endure. But the deeds of the righteous Amram, who was the spiritual leader of Yisrael, would surely survive. Her parents remarried and bore the child who would save their region. Now, understand this. This is a 6-year-old young girl whom we have come to know that she was a prophet. She gave a word to her parents, and her father is a spiritual leader. Yet they hearkened, and they moved to the voice of Abba, coming from this young girl, their daughter, as they know his voice. Ponder this. How well do you know his voice? When was the last time you heard his voice? They knew, and so what did they do? They remarried after they heard this from her mouth, these words, that wisdom that came forth. They remarried and they bore a child. They had divorced because of the edict. They had reacted impartial to fear, and they reacted in their own mindset. And so the question to really ask yourself is, who is your protector? That if a word or something is given, will you fear it? Or will you come to understand why it was placed there? And will you go unto the Father to ask the question, what shall I do? You are my protector. Moshe's life was saved by Pharaoh's daughter, and he was raised under the doting care of the very king who had ordered him killed to prevent the salvation of Yisrael. Many designs are in a man's heart. Many designs are in a man's heart, but the counsel of Yahweh, only it will prevail. That comes from Proverbs 19th chapter 21st verse. Amram was the Levite man who was Moses' father. He lived 137 years. 137 years. Amram married Yocheved, who was also from the tribe of Levi, one of Jacob's 12 sons. And we also have come to know that her name also means honor of Yoheved, or Yoheved is glory, as I mentioned before. Amram and Yochebed were strong in their faith during a time when many Israelites had become idolatrous. How do we know? Moshe in the wilderness instructed them to put away pagan gods. And it was in Joshua 24 chapter 14 verse. And it states, "Throw away gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt." So we know that some of Israel had compromised. Just like today, true faith is mixed with pagan beliefs. But this couple worshiped Yoheved. This couple had great faith. Hebrew 11:23. By faith they hid Moshe. They saw life through the eyes of faith. So what is this faith? What is this definition of how do we define this word, this thing called faith? And I'm going to be coming through the Tanakh and also through the Aramaic Bible with many of the scriptures that you will hear in this podcast. Now, faith is the conviction concerning those things that are in hope, as if it were these things in action, and the revelation of those things that are unseen. Hebrews 11 chapter 1st verse. So what does it mean that they had faith? Certainly faith in Yoheved, that he exists, that he made a covenant with Abraham, that set them apart as a chosen people, his people. They had faith that Yoheved had made promises to them through Abraham that they would be a nation, a people with land, their land. The prophecy of 400 years of bondage, Genesis chapter 15, 13th verse, was coming to a close. So when Yochebed gave birth to Moses, or Moshe, birth is a man went from the house, as we know, of Levi, and he took the daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and gave birth to the son. She saw that he was good, and she hid him for 3 months. Hebrew 11:23 says that by faith the parents of Moshe hid him for 3 months when he was born, and when they saw that the boy was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. Come to understand, he was not an ordinary child. Hebrew for fine is tov, T-O-V, which means good, beautiful. It's the same words that is used in the creation account in Genesis 1 verse 4. Light, 10, land and sea, 18, sun, moon, stars, 25, animals, 31, mankind looked, and it said, very good. Moshe was tov, beautiful, fine, good, and not ordinary. This word conveys the possibility that Yocheved sensed something was special about her new baby boy. Yahweh might use him to fulfill the promise. Exodus 2:2. and she hid him for 3 months. That he was good. The entire house became filled with light upon his birth. Well, it is also told he was born circumcised, indicating spiritual perfection. I have even seen, and we know that this is a covenant that has been in place between Abba and us. And they've been having even articles that I saw recently that now they want to try to call that circumcising a child now, they want to consider it as abuse. And there's also health issues as to why it is necessary for a child to be circumcised. So if it's more of a health issue than anything else that will help, I don't see why, there's all this drama about circumcision now. And the fact that those of us who are under Abba needs to understand it's a commandment. And at a certain amount of days, the son should be circumcised. It should be the parent's choice, not some other people. If you don't want to have that done, that's on you. Don't get mad later. But it was also told that he was born circumcised. So why is that so hard for us to understand? And why is that we can't fathom this in our mindset that the Father is able to do anything? He's not. He doesn't live in a box. The universe can't even hold him. And this is indicating of spiritual perfection. The words to know what? Miriam had prophesied that her parents would give birth to the Savior of the people. So she was confident that he would be saved. The question was on what would be done, meaning how Yahweh would cause him to survive. Now, this is that same 6-year-old prophet. Her maidservant, the plain meaning is that Pharaoh's daughter, Princess Bithia, sent one of her maidservants to retrieve the basket. Aggadically, Aggadicly, or Haggadah, Aggadah, or Haggadah. It means serving to illustrate the meaning or purpose of the law, the custom, or biblical passage being discussed. The word is translated her arm. Example means that she extended her arm, this maidservant, and miraculously it became long enough to reach the basket. Her example teaches us that one should never assume that a task is impossible. You see, all around at that time, I think it was gators that was in the waters, because of the fact that we know that when they tossed the babies, the Hebrew boys, in to the water, they not only just drowned, but they also became a food source for the gators. Can you imagine how many gators had piled up on the banks around that particular area? And so there was also a fear of either falling into the water possibly, or that, something was going to emerge and catch her beforehand. But when she had extended her arm, miraculously, it became long enough to reach the basket. So we need to remember that this teaches us that one should never assume that a task is impossible. A word nurse from the Hebrew women. Now here's something I really want you to catch this. The baby Moshe refused to nurse from Egyptian women. The baby refused to nurse from Egyptian women, because Yahweh said, "Shall the mouth that will converse with the divine presence drink unclean milk. Let me state that again. I know somebody is up on their feet. Shall the mouth that will converse with the divine presence drink unclean milk? In addition, shall an Egyptian woman boast, I fed the mouth that converses with the divine presence? So why is this so? You have to realize that his father and his mother are the tribe of Levi. They are a royal priesthood. In the priesthood, you do not mix clean and unclean. You do not eat unclean. You eat clean. You do not lay with unclean. You lay with clean. You do not cohabitate clean with unclean. And then there's certain other things, there's certain even materials you do not mix together. So if this is not an example of unevenly yoked, I don't know what is. You have to understand that these people, these Egyptian people, honored different gods. The gods with falcons on the top, or the head of a man's body, or they had a bull on the top of something else, and they have a god for this, they had a god for that, they have a god for when they eat, they had a god for when they sleep, they had a god for this thing, they had a god for that thing. And then they did not know of the God of Yeshua. So these ones, because we know that the word tells us that we are not to follow and put no other gods before him. So if these gods was there that she would have worshipped, then she would try to place the one she called the divine presence was the God that she worshipped, and not the one of Yisrael. So shall the mouth that will converse with the divine presence drink unclean milk? And shall an Egyptian woman boast, that is unclean, I fed the mouth that converses with the divine presence? Selah. Now, if you need to pause this for a minute and grasp that, that's fine. And turn it back on. You can. The message will still be here. And the words that said, and nursed him. This was Yoheved's reward for protecting the babies. Not only did her own child survive, but she nursed him and taught him and imparted into him with the people's beliefs during the most impressionable years of his life. Moshe and Bithia, she gave him the Egyptian name Monios, Monios, which means that he was drawn from the water. And Moshe is the Hebrew translation of that word. It was drawn from the water. Drawn from the water. Water of life. The Pharaoh's edict. When the plan or edict to have the midwives kill all the male newborns failed, Pharaoh gave the order to throw all baby boys into the Nile and drown them. Now, he first had ordered the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill all new Hebrew boys. They disobeyed, and when he asked them why, they tell him that Hebrew women give birth so quickly that the midwives can't get there in time. Yahweh dealt well with the midwives and made them houses. And he made them houses. Now, let's look at this for a minute. Some scholars argue that the two halves of each verses are parallel, so that it is the Israelites who multiplied and grew greatly, for whom Yahweh made houses. This fits with the reference in Exodus 1:1 to the children of Israel coming down to Egypt, each with his house. However, the more common view is that the houses are for the midwives. Houses here being understood as dynasties. The rabbinic thought has understood these as the houses of kahunas, K-E-H-U-N-A-H, priesthood, and the Levi, L-E-V-I-Y-A-H, as assistants to the priests, and royalty, the latter interpreted as coming from Miriam. The name is written S-P-R-A, or it should be a dash between the P and the R, and means to be fair or beautiful. The name was related to or even the same as the Aramaic Sephirah, and up to the slight adaptation as Siphrah, S-I-P-H-R-A-H, the name of the Hebrew midwife. The name of the second midwife, Puah, P-U-A-H, is a Canaanite name which means lass or little girl. And this may have been the first known incident of civil disobedience in history. So they were given their own houses, so they were made of the royal priesthood. Can you imagine trying to hide a newborn child and keeping them quiet? Most babies, when they're born and when they come out at some point, a child will cry. They cry if they're hungry, they cry, they want attention, and something is making them uncomfortable, or they just fight and sleep. Sometimes you just can't tell a child, hush, a newborn, and tell them just hush, and they'll hush. You have to find out what is the circumstances or the reason for the crying. But this strong faith in these women and this woman, but also what courage all three of them had, and this includes Moshe's mother. It's a strong faith this woman has, Yoheved, but also what courage. Hebrews 11:23, they were not afraid of the king's edict. But what if she had been found out? Possibly they would take the baby and kill him. Perhaps she would lose her life, potentially the whole family, husband, 2 other children. Miriam was a young little girl, and Aaron was 3 years old. The choice to hide the baby put the whole family at risk. If you ever studied history or watched sometimes even some of the Asian movies that I sometimes will watch, if somebody had came against the emperor or came against the king or what have you, generally not only did the person who committed the crime die, but the entire family got wiped out and lost everything if they did survive. But there came a day when she knew she couldn't hide him any longer and had to let him go. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch. And she put the child therein and laid it in the flags by the river's banks, Exodus 2 and 3. Her alternate choices. What if she kept the baby? Eventually the authorities would come. What would she do if he was snatched out of her arms and was taken to certain death? Or would it have been wise to distance herself from this baby and let someone else throw him in the Nile? After all, she had a husband and 2 other children to consider and take care of. What to do? What would you do? All her choices were difficult. Have you ever been there in a situation in your life that no matter which decision you contemplated on and decided that if you made this or if you did that, they all seemed risky or there was no way out of this decision? Nothing. Have you been there? What would you do? Yocheved made a decision and made a plan. And she could not hide him any longer. She took that wicker basket and smeared it with clay and pitch, and she placed him into it and placed it among the reeds at the bank of the river. And her sister was stationed. And see, she was stationed there for a purpose, at a distance, to know what would be done with him, because she had that much faith because of what she heard from Abba, that he would survive. So she wanted to know how was he going to survive? And while Princess Bithias, her attendants were walking up and down the banks, keeping undesirable people and animals away, she saw the basket. She was curious what could be in it. These words tell us that she herself opened it. She didn't have them to open it. Generally, the servants opened everything. They gathered this, they were just instructed to do, and that's what they did. But she just had the one maid servant to go and get the basket. And remember, it was miraculously stretched long enough to grab that basket and brought it in to her. But Princess Bithiah herself opened it and saw Moshe, and at that very moment, that is when he cried. Sometimes you wonder that if she picked him up and if she cuddled him to stop his cries, did he smile at her and melt her heart that she took pity on this child? But at that instant, when she saw him and they looked probably out of eye contact, that very moment was when he cried. This is a huge part of this particular story. Because she is given this particular translation that says that such as she felt sorry for him. But that the verb is stronger than that. It means to have compassion, to pity, to spare. When she felt for the baby, or I should say, what she felt for the baby, was strong enough to promote her to spare the child from the fate decreed from Hebrew boys. What was perceived by many to be a womanly weakness, compassion for a baby, is a strong enough emotion to prompt this woman to defy the orders of her father Pharaoh. The ruler had thought sparing women was safe, but the midwives, the Hebrew mother, the daughter of Pharaoh, and Miriam all worked together to spare this one male child, Moshe. And really, in reality, if you looked at it, that all of these women are of great influence. They are influential women. And when this little 26-year-old prophet, Miriam, steps forward and approaches the daughter and volunteers her service to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child, whom do you think she brings back? She brings her mother, the baby's own mother, Yoheved. So Yoheved got her own child back, at least for 3 years. Years she had to love and influence her child for Yoheved. These were the 3 years that she had him to impart into him all that she had of the people of Israel and of the God of Israel, of Yahuwah, Yoheved. Eloi. See, the providence, foresight, sense, provisions, destiny of Yahweh is in this story. So why to trust? Yahweh just happened to put Moses in the right spot on the Nile. The Pharaoh's daughter, Bithia, just happened to see the basket. Moshe just happened to cry at the right time. And Miriam just happened to be nearby. And Yoheved just happened to be available and able to nurse. And the Pharaoh's daughter just happened to have enough influence to save the baby Moshe. Faith and trust in Yahweh knows that even when Yahweh seems silent, he is always working for the good of his children. Faith and trust in Yahweh knows that Yahweh often works behind the scenes of our lives. What some call fate or luck, or it's just happening, it's really Abba's providential care. And during this time, he learned about the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and the great covenantal promises made to the people of Israel. He also learned how to have faith in Yahweh and fearless courage. But there came a day when he grew older, when Yocheved had to let him go again. To let him go and trust Yahweh again. The boy grew up, and she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was a son to her. She called his name Moses, as she said, for I drew him from the water. And remember, we said that the Egyptian name is Monios, Monios, which means he was drawn from the water. And Moshe is the Hebrew translation of that word. He was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, but Yocheved watched over him until he was 7. She continued to instill the gentle character and holiness with a strong belief in Yahweh, creator of heaven and earth, of man and beast, into Moshe. She also told him of the sacred promises of Yahweh and of the sacred traditions of Israel. She also told him of the divine promise to Abraham and to his descendants that they would become a great nation. This lowly Levite mother could rejoice that her son Moshe, as the adopted son of the princess, would receive the best education available in a king's palace, and could later have the privilege of boys of highest rank and probably an education of Heliophilus, Heliopolis, which is the Oxford of ancient Egypt. In later years, when the priest of Egypt would try to initiate her son into idolatry, he would remember his mother's Yahweh and her faith in him, and he would remain an Israelite at heart, through all the years of his life. And he remained Israelite at heart through all the years of his life. We can be quite sure that it was his mother's early influence that enabled Moshe to make the decision to leave the court and go out amongst his own brethren and lift their burden. For from her, he had inherited loyalty to his own race. going to give the summary and I'm going to close. So Yochebed was the mother of Moshe. She was influenced history by surrendering what she treasured most to the will of Yahweh. When the Egyptians began killing the male babies of the Hebrew slaves, Yocheved put baby Moses in a waterproof basket and set it adrift on the Nile River. The Pharaoh's daughter found and adopted him as her own son. Yahweh arranged it so that Yocheved could be the baby's wet nurse. Even though Moshe was raised as an Egyptian, Yahweh chose him to lead his people to freedom. The faith of Yochebed saved Moshe to become Israel's great prophet and lawgiver. He was a sent one, so he was an apostle too. Imagine the emotions, the feelings Yochebed had as she placed him down and backed away. She placed him. Imagine being her as she left him alone in the water in a basket. And you surrender by faith that which you treasure the most. Yes, Miriam is watching from a distant place on the shore, but she, his mother, had to let him go. She had to walk away. She had to surrender that which she loved. She didn't just let him go. You have to understand, she was a woman of faith. And she let him go and she trusted Yahuwah. She trusted her Yahuwah. The life of Yocheved as a woman of influence teaches us that there are times in our lives when we have done all we can do. We said all we can say. There is no more or nothing else to do. And we have to. It's the truth here. Let it go and trust Yahuwah. The genealogical information about his mother as not only the daughter of Levi, but also as the wife and aunt of a Levite, serves to highlight the priestly pedigree of both Moshe and Aaron. In addition, Yocheved, whose name apparently means, we already know that is Yahweh is glory, is notable as the first person in the Bible to have a name with the divine element Yah, Y-A-H. It's a shortened form of YHWH. Notable, the first person in the Bible to have a name with the divine element Yah. The tradition that Moshe announces to the Israelites that Yahuwah is the name of their God in Exodus 6, 1-8, is thus embedded in his maternal lineage. If his mother bears Abba's name, then Moshe learned it from her. Moshe was 80. Let me give you this little side note. He was 80 years old when the Exodus occurred. The Israelites had been in Egypt for 210 years in total, and thus in combination with the rabbinical claim that Yoheved was born on the border of Egypt as her parents had entered it, this would require Yoheved to have been 130 years old when she gave birth to Moshe. Okay, you might want to rewind that back and get that again. Selah. She was 130 years old when she gave birth to Moshe. This was not uncommon. We know this from Abraham and Sarah. So when Moshe was 80, when Yahweh spoke to him from the burning bush, it is almost certain that Yocheved had died before Moshe came out of exile. But Yahweh, in his grace and in his time, had an intimate and special relationship with Moshe. as he had him lead his people out of bondage and through the wilderness for 40 years before finally bringing them to the edge of the promised land. All because of the mother whose name has the name of Abba in it. So she was special in his sight. Yoheved's experiences show us that mothers need to be flexible and creative, especially during difficult circumstances. Yocheved stands as a reminder to parents never to lose faith that Yahweh will work in the lives of their children. Most parents live to see this, but some, like Yocheved, don't. How wonderful it is to understand that even after we aren't here to pray for our children, Yahweh continues to answer our prayers. Yocheved, like many mothers today, lovingly gave her child up for another to raise. Yahweh honored her by using her son for his glory, and also for his godly purposes. And Yahweh used all emotional circumstances to make him into the man he needed him to be. She and her husband were from the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe. And so even Miriam had the right lineage as well, a royal lineage. I had asked the question in the first episode of Miriam, who is the mother of Yahushua, of the same series. And as this is similar, I will ask of this episode, could you surrender your child to the plan of Abba, knowing that it would cost you dearly? Dearly meaning to let go of your child for whatever the circumstance, but in this particular instance, to another woman to raise. That she is called mother by your child that you surrendered. Knowing that you could not say a thing, you could not acknowledge any connection. Could you be an influential woman, such as this woman, and obey when Abba says, I need this, I need that, I need you to do this. Surrender this over, let this go. Don't keep that. We can't have that. Don't touch this. Don't eat that. But could you surrender what is needed to surrender for you to reach your divine destiny in your life, in your businesses, and even in your ministry? For his glory, not your own, and be obedient. Can you be an influential woman of this day and age to other women by the choices that you decide to make? Abba, for I have given unto them the words which thou gavest me, and they have received them. And my tefillah for you is that you were able to glean from this field, that you have come to understand this relationship this woman had and her faith that she had in Yahweh. And understand that because of a decree that had put them temporarily in a mindset to fear, that because of a word that they had received, that their faith was rebuilt back up, and they moved on that faith and did what was necessary. And because of the things that sometimes that happen in our lives, that we have to make a decision about, we have to ponder on the given situation, and we have to have the providence, which is the foresight, sense, provision, and destiny to know how we would do. And first and foremost is we have to trust. We also had to understand that Did she have alternative choices? Sometimes we do all that we can do. And we look at all these kind of things that come in to hit us. And sometimes even now in our lives with the things that are going on, all we can do is intercede for our children. And sometimes we have to let them go and let them do. And believe that the prayers that you have spoken by his authority, and Yahushua was authority, that the Father has his hands on him, and by your faith, you know that he will take care of these children, your children. Could you let your children go? Some of us need to let them go so that they can develop who they are and come to know him on their own. We can't sometimes always protect them from something because his training method is different than our training method. And so, could you let your greatest treasure go? And I close with benediction. Yahweh, or Yahweh, he who exists, will kneel before you, presenting gifts, and will guard you with a hedge of protection. Yahweh, he who exists, will illuminate the wholeness of his being towards you, bringing order, and he will provide you with love, sustenance, and friendship. Yahweh, he who exists, will lift up his wholeness of being and look upon you, and he will set in place all you need to be whole and complete. So shall they put my name upon the children of Yisrael, and I will bless them. Then this comes from Numbers 6, chapter 24 to 27 verse. Thank you again for joining in on this episode. I am your host, Chayah Janet E. Brown. And you have listened to Eishet Chayil podcast, which is part of the women's ministry of Chayah Ministries Global. And we are in the series of influential women of Torah. And tonight we have talked about Yocheved. And so my prayer for you that you gleaned and your baskets are full, and that you will be able to distribute from your own basket into other people, and that these sessions, this particular series will help influence you in your everyday life and on the task that you have at hand for becoming an influential woman of this time and for such a time as this. And shalom, shalom.